In my last Offroad Outlaws video, we talked a lot about dually trucks, wheel setups, potential future updates, and more. Now, one suggestion that I kept seeing over and over and over and over again in the comments was people saying we want more parts for ATVs to allow us to build bounty hole style ATVs. And when I say I saw this in the comments a lot, I mean I literally saw it a ton. It was everywhere. And I was thinking to myself, okay, well, I think I know what this is. I'm 99.9% sure I know what this is. So I went and I looked it up, and it's essentially ATVs, like four-wheelers and side-by-sides with enormous lifts. Some have, enormous, like, custom fabricated subframes underneath them, and a lot of them have gigantic tires, way bigger than you would see on any kind of normal ATV. And I was like, okay, well, if there are a lot of people that are wanting to build this style of ATV in Offroad Outlaws, and they're requesting more parts for it, I would like to see how close we can get to that in the game right now to see how much farther we might have to go in terms of extra parts that they would need to add to the game. So what I decided to do was I decided to attempt to get as close to building one as I possibly could. And what you'll see a little bit later on in the video is it went fairly well. In order to get the amount of lift that this thing has now, we had to stiffen it all the way. And so we were kind of limited in terms of what we could do for damping and stuff like that. So it is just a tiny bit bouncy. I was able to tune a little bit of that out, but not all of it. And I'm sure that if I went back and refined the suspension tune just a little bit more, I might be able to sort of dial it in a little bit more, but it's never going to be perfectly smooth with a suspension that is stretched this much, because it's essentially stretched out as far as I can get it. And, think of taking a rubber band and just pulling it as tight as humanly possible. What does that rubber band want to do? It wants to explode back in either direction the second you let go of it. And that's kind of what this suspension turned out like. But it was kind of a sacrifice that I had to make, considering the fact that for a build like this, you just need as much height as humanly possible. That's essentially what these ATVs have in real life. I mean, there are some videos that I've seen, and I actually stumbled across one not too long ago, where they're trying to, I can't remember what it was, I think it was a Can-Am, but it had one of these, massive, like, bounty hole style lifts, and they were trying to drive it off of the side of a trailer, and the second they drove it off the side of the trailer, the hub just kind of, I can't remember what side it was on. I think it was on the front right corner. The hub just like split and it like separated from the rest of the suspension, and it was just like, oh, so that's broken. But it didn't have any give, like, at all. Now, granted, that might have been, not the greatest of builds, or it might not have been upgraded the right way. I don't know. But a lot of these things seem to be very, I don't know. It's like they're built for one specific purpose, and they do that one thing pretty well, but they don't do a lot of other things outside of that one thing very well. And I kind of feel like that's where we were at with this, because it's so stiff that if you get on the power, like from a dig, it just instantly wheelies to the point to where it does a backflip. So you kind of have to vary it off the line. You kind of have to vary your throttle input a little bit. Now, granted, if you're doing it on, like if you're doing a launch on dirt, that's kind of where it's going to get most of its grip. If you're doing a launch in mud, you'll be okay. So it's not really all that big of a deal. But I was actually impressed with how much speed this thing was able to carry in the mud. And actually, as you'll see a little bit later on, it's pretty dang quick, especially for how tall the tires are. Now, switching things up a bit and going back through some of the comments of my last Offroad Outlaws video, I wanted to highlight a few comments and suggestions that led to this video, and sort of some of the direct ones, as you know, are, the people requesting more parts focused around bounty hole style builds, which we're not going to be highlighting those because we already know that those are a big thing, but some people suggested that they would like to see just more ATV selection in general, like something in the style of a Grizzly or an Outlander, and they would also like to see more Jeeps and more customization options for the Jeep that we have, and also more customization options for additional Jeeps that they may add. The Gladiator keeps popping up as a recurring suggestion, so clearly a lot of people would like to see a Jeep Gladiator in the game, and I can see why, because the Jeep Gladiator, I think, makes a lot of sense for Offroad Outlaws, considering the fact that A, you see so many of them on the road, and B, a lot of people own them. A lot of people are used to having a Jeep Gladiator around, and I'm I'm sure that if they got added to the game, there would be a massive variety of builds, from people that would do kind of like a stock style build, to a rock crawler, to a mudding build, to maybe even a hauling build. Who knows? Another suggestion that I saw in the comments of the last Offroad Outlaws video that I want to talk about is, it's actually from, I believe, Christopher Landon 2782, and they said, it was a long comment, so bear with me here. They said, I would love to see something like a bed rack that has things like a rooftop tent and traction boards mounted to the outside of it, so essentially an overland setup. Another thing I would like to see is a flat roof rack option instead of the roof basket, which, again, very specific, but very interesting suggestions. They say they would also like to see more overland items in general, like awnings, rooftop tents, mud flaps, things like that. And they would also like to have the ability to add jerry cans next to the spare tire when it's mounted on the rear of the vehicle to make the tire carrier look a little bit more realistic. They would also like to see ditch lights, like light pods that are kind of directed down towards the corners of the vehicle, with the ability to customize the lighting locations. And they would also like to see more realistic Baja fenders and better looking Baja truck builds in general. So essentially more upgrades to allow us to build more realistic looking Baja trucks, which there are a lot of people in Offroad Outlaws that build Baja style trucks. We just don't necessarily have all of the customization options to fully build out a Baja truck. Now, I know that we also mentioned rally cars in the last video, and how someone commented that they think rally cars would be a really cool addition to the game because of all the different types of maps that it would kind of, open up in terms of possibilities, and also the racing gameplay and dynamics that could kind of evolve out of that. And surprisingly, I saw a lot of comments in my prior Offroad Outlaws video where I talked about rally cars where people said they would actually be quite interested in that, and I honestly didn't expect that many people to be interested in rally cars. I expected more of a, well, that would be kind of cool, but I would rather have, I would rather have more mud trucks. I would rather have more, Jeeps or crawlers. But no, a lot of people were actually like, oh, I would love to see rally cars. And I was like, okay, all right. That was not what I was expecting, but I'm certainly not mad about that response. Now, obviously, I don't think they should change the entire game to focus on rally cars, but I think having a couple of them here and there, or like maybe three really, really good ones, would be an amazing start. And interestingly, I saw a lot of people commenting as well about wanting interior customization, or rather just more options for customizing the interior of their vehicles in general. Now, I didn't think all that many people played Offroad Outlaws in the interior camera, but according to my comments, there's a lot more of y'all out there than I thought, which I think is amazing. Now, if you are someone that prefers to play Offroad Outlaws in the interior camera, what do you like about it? What do you not like about it? What do you think that they could improve upon? And I mean, granted, I definitely think that they could sort of improve the overall quality of the interiors, but I genuinely didn't realize there were that many people that were playing this game in the interior camera. I thought it was kind of something that people sort of left alone, especially in terms of just the way it, the way it looks, because it's not a gorgeous interior camera. So I was just kind of like, okay, well, I'll just play in third-person view. But I love the fact that there's a lot more people out there that use it than I ever thought. Another one that I saw popping up in the comments a lot was people suggesting a non-dually version of the newer Ford F-350. Now, I think that that would be amazing to see, and I'm still kind of disappointed that when they released that truck, it was kind of available only in dually form, and if you actually look at the details really closely, it's more of a 450 than it is a 350, and I think obviously that's, that's very tiny little minor details, it's splitting hairs, but I do think having a non-dually version of that newer Ford in general, one, I don't think it would be all that hard for them to do. I mean, I could be wrong, I'm not a developer, but it doesn't seem like it would be something that would be all that difficult for them to do, and I think it would open up, again, more customization choice for players, because the more choice you have, the better the game is going to be, and I will always stand by that. The more choice you have for customization options in a game, the more opportunities people are going to have to build the vehicles they want. And oh dear, I think I was done on that one. I think I was just like, when I went upside down into the mud, even looking at the game, I was like, oh yeah, that's not good. But it also gave me an opportunity to, like, nos my way over the freaking track in a proper backflip. So, you know, either way, it's like no big deal, and it worked out. Now, wrapping up here, my final thoughts on this build is that I think it's actually better than I thought it was going to be. I know we kind of sidetracked a little bit away from the build itself, but I think it turned out good. I don't think it turned out great, but I think it turned out good, and I think it has room for improvement. Now, one thing I do want to say about this build is that I don't think it's, let's say, quite as large, quite as lifted as a lot of people want to be able to make these bounty hole style builds. And I built this to see how close I could get to a lot of the examples that I found online when I looked up this style of builds. And I do think that a lot of people would use the extra customization features if they were added. But as always, we're gonna have to wait and see if it's something that the developers choose to add in the future. But if y'all enjoyed this video, let me know your thoughts and opinions in the comments below. Hit that like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see y'all next time.